My name is Janet Walker, and I never thought my life would end up here, sitting alone in my mother's spare bedroom at 43 years old, surrounded by boxes of clothes I no longer recognize, trying to understand the exact moment everything in my life fractured beyond repair. If you had asked anyone 3 years ago, they would have told you Martin and I were one of the strongest, most consistent couples in our neighborhood. Stable, mature, predictable in a comforting way. We were the couple that hosted barbecues, remembered birthdays, brought casserole to funerals. The couple everyone assumed would grow old together. And for 20 years, I believed that too. We built a home. We raised our daughter. We made plans, steady, solid plans. We had Sunday routines, inside jokes, future vacations mapped out down to the restaurants we wanted to try. Martin and I never fought dramatically. We disagreed. We discussed. We compromised. He was the calmest person I knew, level-headed in every crisis. He balanced me, grounded me. Then life stopped being predictable. The day I heard the word malignant, everything inside me shifted violently. The doctor's office was too white, too quiet, too cold. I remember staring at my hands, noticing how small they looked against the paper gown, while my mind screamed silently behind my ribs. Cancer. The word echoed over and over like a thunderclap that only I could hear. I never expected fear to become physical, but it did. It sat inside my chest, heavy and constant, compressing every breath. It followed me home, into the bathroom where I stared at my reflection, realizing that the woman I thought I was, the reliable wife, the devoted mother, was suddenly mortal in a way she had never imagined. Martin held me like he was trying to keep me from disappearing. He attended every appointment, asked every question I forgot to ask. He researched diets, treatments, meditation routines. He walked with me through every terrible night that felt like it might be the last one. I loved him for that. And yet, ironically, that was where the seed of destruction quietly planted itself inside me. When your mortality stares you in the face, horrifying thoughts creep in. Thoughts you never imagined you were capable of thinking. Did I waste time? Did I live cautiously instead of fully? Did I ever choose myself? Fear rewrites your priorities in cruel ways. Months passed in hospitals, chemotherapy chairs, endless scans. The mirror became the enemy. My body felt foreign, temporary. My identity crumbled. And in that hollow space, an old insecurity surfaced. I have never lived for myself. One afternoon, after a particularly draining appointment, I returned to work for the first time in months. My coworkers greeted me with relief. Too much sympathy in their eyes. Except him, Ryan, my coworker. He didn't look at me like a patient. He didn't treat me gently. He complimented my work ethic, joked about how the office fell apart without me, told me I looked strong. For a moment, I felt like more than a medical chart, more than a diagnosis, more than a burden someone had to care for. I felt alive. I never thought I would crave that feeling the way I did. But when death brushes past you, life in all its simplest forms becomes intoxicating.
I didn't cheat then.
But the crack in my integrity appeared quietly, invisibly, deep below the surface. Remission came months later. Unexpected. Miraculous. Everyone expected me to return to who I was before.
Martin certainly did.
He celebrated, hugged me, cried silently into my shoulder, believing we had beaten something together. But inside me, something was still broken. I had changed. And I didn't know how to explain that without sounding ungrateful or insane. I started staying up late, staring at the ceiling wondering, is this it? Is this all I will ever experience? What if I have only a few years and I spend them being safe instead of alive? I didn't tell Martin. I didn't want to hurt him with fears he couldn't fix. Instead, I told Kathy, my closest friend. Loud, messy, impulsive Kathy. She had always lived life on her own terms. Divorced 3 times, never apologetic. She drank too much, flirted shamelessly, and loved drama like it was oxygen. When I confessed how restless I felt, she didn't judge me. She smiled. You almost died, Janet. Stop living like a porcelain doll. Then she said something I should have never believed. You deserve to explore. He'll understand. That sentence carved a tunnel inside my brain. And once it existed, I couldn't close it. One night, exhausted from the emotional hurricane in my head, I sat across from Martin at the dinner table. He was reading a novel while eating leftover pasta, comfortable in the familiarity we built over decades. And I shattered it with one sentence. I want a hall pass. He froze, slowly put the fork down, closed the book carefully, and stared at me. Confusion first, then disbelief, then a devastation so raw I had to look away. What are you talking about? He asked quietly. I tried to explain. I tried to express the fear inside me, the desperation, the regret, the craving to feel something before life slipped away again. But the more I spoke, the deeper the knife twisted. He listened, every word carving into him. Then, gently but firmly, he said no. He told me marriage meant commitment. That fear didn't justify betrayal. That love wasn't replaceable. And instead of hearing him, I heard a cage door slamming shut. I slept horribly that night,
Tossing. Crying.
arguing with myself in whispers. The next morning, I woke up with the worst clarity of my life. I sat beside him, fully dressed, staring at my hands the way I had in the doctor's office months before. And I told him, I can't let fear dictate my choices anymore. I'm doing this, with or without your permission. He looked at me like he was watching a stranger wearing my face. That evening was Ryan's farewell party. He was leaving the company.
People were celebrating him.
I should have stayed home. I should have canceled. I should have chosen my husband. Instead, I walked into that bar wearing the one dress that always made me feel confident. The music was loud, the alcohol flowing, everyone laughing. He greeted me with a hug. Too long, too familiar, too dangerous. He whispered, You look incredible tonight. My heart pounded, not with excitement, but with fear. Not fear of doing the wrong thing, fear that I wouldn't go through with it. Eventually, he stepped outside. To smoke.
To breathe.
And I followed. He looked surprised when I reached for his hand. I didn't think. I didn't reason. I just acted. We walked away together. Down the sidewalk. Toward a hotel I didn't want to admit I had already noticed earlier. And with every step, the life I had built was burning quietly behind me. In the elevator, he kissed me. I felt nothing. No thrill. No spark. No liberation. Just numbness. Deep and consuming. A woman watching herself destroy everything she ever loved from outside her own body. The next morning, Ryan snored beside me on the hotel bed while I stared at the ceiling in horrific clarity. And all I could think was, what have I done? When I got home, Martin wasn't there. His car gone. His phone off. There was a note on the kitchen table. It was short.
Cold. Precise.
I know.
Don't come near me.
I collapsed on the kitchen floor, sobbing into my hands, regretting everything too late. But it wasn't until 2 days later that I learned the truth. Martin didn't find out because I confessed. He found out because he saw me with his own eyes. And that moment, the moment he told me that, was the moment everything I had left shattered permanently. Martin told me the truth 3 days after the affair. I had spent those days desperately trying to reach him, calling, texting, leaving voicemails so long I wasn't sure what I was even saying by the end of them. I was terrified, ashamed, and drowning in the kind of guilt that seems to crawl under your skin and nest there. I kept imagining that maybe, just maybe, we could sit down and talk, and he would understand the fear that took over my mind. Not forgive me, not instantly, but at least see me. He ignored every attempt. Then, on the third night, he came home early, earlier than he had since everything broke. I remember hearing his keys at the door, my heart jumping, my breath catching painfully. I thought he finally came home to talk, to reach out, to try. Instead, he walked past me without a word, headed straight to the bedroom, and started packing a suitcase. That was when I broke. Martin, please, I begged, standing in the doorway, my arms wrapped around myself because I didn't know how not to. Just talk to me. Yell at me. Something. Anything. He didn't even look up from folding shirts. I saw you. 3 words. Just 3 words. And they obliterated me. I saw you walk out of the bar with him, holding his hand. His voice was eerily calm, destructive in its calmness. I saw you choose him. My knees nearly gave out. It wasn't, Martin, please. I wasn't thinking clearly. No, he interrupted, still emotionless. You were thinking clearly enough to do it. You just weren't thinking responsibly. I stood frozen, unable to breathe, while he zipped the suitcase closed. He finally looked at me, and I wished desperately that he hadn't. Because his eyes weren't angry. They were empty. Completely, utterly empty. I would have given anything for anger in that moment. Anger means connection. Anger means emotion. Anger means there's still something left to fight for. But his silence was a gravestone. He walked out that night. Not to a hotel. Not to a friend's house. He went to his sister's. And he stayed there for weeks. The next days blurred into each other in a way grief tends to make reality dissolve. I kept expecting him to return, expecting to wake up from this nightmare, expecting the world to rewind to one single decision. But life doesn't rewind. It only amplifies consequences. And consequences arrived fast. Our daughter came home for the weekend. I knew Martin would tell her. I knew it was inevitable. But I still prayed, irrationally, that he wouldn't. When she stood in the kitchen doorway, eyes already red from crying, I felt a pain unlike anything cancer ever gave me. She looked older in that moment. Harder. Colder. Mom, did you cheat on Dad? I had faced doctors. I had faced mortality. I had faced my own reflection while sick and skeletal. But nothing prepared me for that question. I tried answering gently, honestly. I made a terrible mistake. I was scared and She cut me off. No excuses. Just answer.
So I did.
Yes. She stared like she was seeing the collapse of her childhood in real time. Why? That one word was heavier than gravity itself.
Why?
As if there could ever be a good enough reason. As if fear could justify betrayal. As if emotional panic could erase vows. I tried, God, I tried, to explain the internal chaos, the overwhelming sense of mortality, the months of emotional tornadoes that Martin could never fully understand no matter how hard he tried. But the more I tried explaining, the more disgust filled her expression. You almost died, she snapped. Dad was there for you, every second. And this is what you chose. She didn't yell after that. She didn't cry. She just walked away. And for the next several nights, she stayed at a friend's house. Then with Martin. She didn't come home again after that. Not really. The shift wasn't loud but permanent. I learned something crucial that week. Dying may scare you, but losing your child's respect destroys you. Meanwhile, Kathy decided I needed support, which in her vocabulary meant chaos. She arrived 2 days later with 3 of my other friends and my mother. Martin wasn't home yet. They sat in the living room and staged what they proudly called an intervention. But it wasn't for me. It was for Martin. They were angry at him, furious for refusing to speak to me, for shutting me out, for being emotionally cruel by leaving. When Martin walked in and found a room full of people lecturing him about comforting me after my affair, I saw something inside him snap. Not loudly. Quietly. Dangerously quietly. His jaw tightened. His posture stiffened. His eyes turned into something steely and unfamiliar. He listened without interrupting. Then he looked directly at me and asked, "Did you invite them here to shame me into forgiving you?" I didn't know what to say, because I hadn't, but I didn't stop it either. And that might as well have been the same thing. He turned to my friends, each one of them suddenly unsure of themselves. Then he delivered a sentence so devastatingly calm it made the entire room freeze. "You are all lecturing me about loyalty. Should I call your husbands and share every detail of the encouragement you gave my wife?" Not one of them spoke. My mother looked horrified. Kathy went pale. He opened the front door. "Get out." And they left. Every single one of them. Even my mother. When the door closed, The silence was suffocating. I tried to apologize, to reach him, to explain. But he walked past me without a word, up the stairs, into the locked bedroom. And for the first time since the affair, I truly understood the scale of my destruction. Not just the act, not just the betrayal, but the humiliation, the exposure, the violation of his dignity. In front of an audience. That night, for the first time since remission, I prayed, not for health, not for safety, but for mercy. The next morning, he left without saying goodbye. He didn't come home after work. The air in the house was suffocatingly heavy. I sat alone on the couch until 2 a.m., hugging my knees, listening to the clock tick, watching my phone for a message that never came. Finally, I checked his email on the shared device in the kitchen. There was only one new message. From a lawyer. Subject line. Initial consultation confirmed. My vision blurred. My hands shook. My stomach twisted painfully. He was filing for divorce. I knew I deserved it. I knew I caused it. But knowing doesn't soften impact. That night, grief didn't feel emotional. It felt physical. Like something had died inside me.
And in a way,
something had. My marriage wasn't ending. It was already over. The paperwork was just burial procedure. The morning after I discovered Martin had scheduled a consultation with a divorce lawyer, something in me finally broke past denial. Grief stopped being abstract and became something unbearably real. I had convinced myself, naively, that time would cool his anger, that space would soften his silence, that love would slowly coax him back toward me. But all the space did was widen the fracture. The next weeks passed in slow, brutal fragments. Martin officially moved out and stayed with his sister permanently. He didn't tell me personally. I found out when I came home and saw the bedroom emptied except for dust outlines where his books once sat. He changed the locks on our bedroom long before he changed houses. I cried more in those weeks than I ever did during chemotherapy. Fear of death hurts. Fear of regret hurts. But the fear of being left behind by someone you once believed would never leave, that wound slices through you in a way nothing else can. And then the real fallout began. Our daughter stopped calling me. Not angrily, not loudly, just absence. A polite distance. She would text occasionally, practical short messages. I'm staying with Dad tonight. I have school early. I'll pick up my things this weekend. There were no hearts, no emojis, no warmth, just cold logistics. I watched the girl who once curled up beside me on the couch disappear emotionally in real time, and realized I had no right to ask her to return. I had shattered the version of her mother she trusted, and she was grieving that loss in silence. Meanwhile, the world outside our house started imploding as well. Kathy called me in hysterics one night. Her husband had kicked her out. Martin had followed through on his warning. Apparently, her husband had received an email with photos and videos. Her affair wasn't new. It had been going on for months. And worse, some of the messages she had sent encouraging me were included in the evidence. That night, she sobbed over the phone, begging me to let her stay at my house. I almost said yes. Then a realization hit me with perfect clarity. She had encouraged me to self-destruct while being knee-deep in her own. Her chaos wasn't support, it was projection. Her recklessness felt like freedom to her, so she convinced me destruction was liberation. And I listened. I told her she couldn't stay. She called me selfish. Then hung up. Our friendship died that night. Days later, another blow came. A coworker called me with shocking, unbelievable news. Ryan died. The man I destroyed my marriage for. The man who filled my head with dangerous fantasies. The man I chose for a single reckless night
was gone.
A heart attack in a hotel room. With another woman. Someone younger. Someone prettier. He died betraying someone else just as easily as he helped me betray Martin. I sat in the kitchen in stunned, hollow silence. And in that moment, I finally understood. Everything I sacrificed wasn't for love. Wasn't for passion. Wasn't for liberation. It was for an illusion. A flimsy, temporary escape. Not a relationship. Not a future. Not a meaningful connection.
Just a moment.
A reckless, impulsive, terrified moment. That realization didn't heal anything.
It simply deepened the wound.
Soon after, the divorce proceedings began formally, and Martin's silence turned into legal language.
Cold. Brief.
Final. We sat across from each other in the lawyer's office. When the attorney asked if we were sure if reconciliation was an option, if therapy was a possibility, Martin didn't even hesitate. There is nothing left to reconcile. His voice didn't waver. He signed every document with a calm precision, like closing a chapter he had already emotionally buried. The lawyer turned the pages toward me. My hands shook so violently the pen trembled against paper. By the time I signed the final page, tears were streaming down my face. Martin didn't look at me. Not once. He stood, shook the lawyer's hand, and said thank you, then turned to me, just briefly. His expression unreadable. I don't hate you, Janet, he said quietly, but I'll never trust you again. Those words carved into me deeper than anger ever could. Hate burns. Distrust freezes. You can thaw fire. You can't thaw ice. After the divorce finalized, I moved into my mother's house temporarily. Boxes of clothes I no longer wanted filled her spare bedroom. I tossed and turned every night, haunted by unanswered questions that didn't deserve answers. The house felt too small.
Too silent.
Too stark. Like punishment. Eventually, therapy became unavoidable, not because I wanted it, but because collapsing became unbearable. My therapist didn't coddle me.
Didn't defend me.
Didn't soften the truth. She forced me to look inward with brutal honesty. We unpacked everything. The fear, the resentment, the emotional numbness, the grief, the cancer trauma, the identity crisis hiding underneath remission, the desperate craving for validation, the impulsiveness, the self-betrayal. She helped me face the truth I had avoided for months. I wasn't trying to live. I was trying to run.
From fear.
From mortality. From aging. From stagnation. From vulnerability. And in running from those terrors, I sprinted straight into the worst mistake of my life. The weeks turned into months. Martin healed quietly, separately. Our daughter remained distant, but slowly, cautiously, communication began thawing. Not warmly, just steadily. We meet occasionally in small, fragile attempts. There's no anger in her eyes now, just caution. And I'm learning to accept that trust doesn't regrow overnight. Sometimes it doesn't regrow at all. But effort matters. Even if outcome doesn't. People sometimes assume the peak of regret is knowing you hurt someone. But the deepest regret is realizing how precious something was only after you destroyed it. I loved Martin. I still do. But love isn't immunity from stupidity. Love isn't protection from insecurity. Love isn't a shield from fear. And fear is the most effective saboteur on earth.
Now.
Months later, I wake up every morning to reminders of what I ruined. The empty left side of the bed. The absence of his coffee mug. The silence of a daughter who no longer confides in me. The faces of friends who vanished like smoke. I lost everything. Not at once.
Piece by piece.
And the cruel irony? I genuinely thought I was choosing life. Instead, I dismantled mine. One decision. One night. One impulse. Sometimes, you don't cheat because you stopped loving your spouse. Sometimes, you cheat because you stopped loving yourself. And that realization is far more tragic.
Today,
I'm rebuilding. Slowly, quietly, privately. There's no dramatic resurrection. No magical closure. No triumphant transformation. Just accountability, reflection,
therapy,
and the quiet work of stitching together a self I barely recognize. Will I ever forgive myself? Maybe. Will Martin ever look at me the same way?
No.
Will my daughter fully heal? Time will have to decide. If there is one truth I wish every person could learn before they make my mistake, it is this. Moments pass. Consequences don't. One night can ruin 20 years of loyalty. One impulse can break someone permanently. One choice can rewrite a family. And guilt. Guilt is forever. If I could go back to that bar, that sidewalk, those steps toward the hotel, I would grab my own wrist and pull myself backward.
Back toward sanity.
Back toward clarity. Back toward the man who held my hand through cancer. Because the truth is simple. Fear didn't destroy my marriage. I did.
And now,
All I can do is live with that truth.
fully.
Honestly. Quietly. Because honesty is the only thing I have left that hasn't collapsed.